Well, hey, good afternoon, everybody. Dave Cooper, welcome. Today we have a great show for you. We're going to have Dr. Brent Musson on the show. We're going to bring him in 1 second. So I wanted to say we are live on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And I want to appreciate and say I appreciate and thank everybody for joining us today. This is going to be a great expert interview, and we look forward to having it. So why don't we just jump right into it? Why don't we get Dr. Brent Musson on right now and bring him into the live show? Hey, Dr. Musson, how are you, sir?
I'm well. It's good afternoon for you, but it's good morning for me.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, well, listen, it is good morning for you. You're out on that West Coast time right now.
That's right. That's right. Sunny California.
Yeah. Sunny California. So we're having that delay in your voice a little bit there, just so you know. So hopefully we can hopefully catch up on the stream with that. But you know, Dr. Brent Musson, while we're waiting for that stream to catch up, I'm going to run through some of the highlights of your career so far and get into some of your credentials, because listen, I've had several opportunities to speak with you offline, in other words, not live. And the conversations have been magical. And when I say that, just from a human perspective, getting to know you a little bit, understanding your background and where you've come from. I mean, you're not just a higher education scholar, but you have done a lot more than that. I mean, listen, you're the founder of Musson Factories, a manufacturer in LA in offsite construction and assembly. And we're going to jump into that near the end of the show and tell everybody what it's about, because what you're doing there is absolutely amazing. And there's a social aspect to the community that goes along with it. You have degrees in real estate development, urban planning, and supply chain management. And your doctor, Dr. Musson's research is the only published paper about offsite construction in all of Los Angeles. I mean, just that alone is cool. I mean, that's like me saying I'm the only guy doing live feeds in New York City. That's just not happening, right? Right? And to bring it all together with the practical experience that you are both a general contractor and you've been a real estate broker. And to top all of this off, you wrap all this together. You also have PMP and Lean Six Sigma Green Belt and a lot more things. We'd spend an hour just talking about where you've been and what you've done. And I don't think we have more than an hour. So you're going to have to jump into us. Tell us a little bit about Dr. Musson, and let's learn what's going on here.
So thanks. I appreciate the introduction. And I think that the important thing to realize about my preparation for this is that I didn't start off with this idea of creating all these credentials around being a modular manufacturer or an academic in this field. I was drawn to this for a purpose, and I believe that our lives are designed to bring us to our purpose, and so I find that now all of these things just seem to overlap. If you made a Venn diagram, it would show a modular factory in the middle, and so I'm the recipient of divine providence, I believe.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I truly believe that after speaking with you, like I said several times. And you know what? I mean, just so everybody understands, we started to get to know each other once you put your report out that you did and your research paper. And your research paper, when you posted it, you got the attention of a lot of people out there that are into offsite construction, not only here in this country, but around the world. I even saw Evelina from DMD Modular was commenting on it and wanted to read it. And I'm sure several others have picked up on it. So why don't you give us a little bit of background of what your research paper was about? And let's talk about what problems you were trying to solve.
Sure. So the nature of academic research itself is that you ask a very small question, one that's answerable. But surrounding that project is an awful lot of research that provides the background and the context for the question that you're asking. So I had a very specific question about what hurdles there were that were preventing the widespread adoption of offsite construction. But in actuality, to contextualize that, I took a look at the regulatory environment, and we took a look at the finance environment. We took a look at, of course, McKinsey's paper was incredibly important to the research as well, establishing some of the challenges of the construction industry in general. But there are trends around skilled labor and on and on and on and on. And so the paper itself is this sort of a survey of the current status of construction and how offsite fits into it. But it also, I think, most importantly, touches on some of the social problems around housing, the lack of housing affordability. And so, that is, I believe, the context of, what this is really all about. And it's frankly is what got me interested in offsite construction in the first place.
Yeah, sure. All right. So, I mean, it's a large research paper. And so overall, one of the things that we're all looking at is a housing affordability issue, right? There's, as Greg Ugaldi said last Monday, there's a 1 million home deficit in this country. Yeah. Offsite is definitely part of the solution, or can be part of the solution. And your research paper, I think, kind of pointed that out. However, there's an adoption issue that we're having with some of the bigger builders or developers in the country. What is causing that? And I know your paper touches on this, so I think we'd really love to hear, why aren't they adopting it? Because it makes sense. So why not?
Sure. So academic research in modular tends to follow 3 different channels. The first channel was, is it a viable method? We've sort of proven that, yeah, it's a viable method. It's advantageous. The second channel is it, why isn't it being adopted? What are the hurdles to adoption? And then in the places in the world where it has been adopted, then that third channel is improving it, adopting BIM and other technologies. And so my research falls into that area of why isn't it being adopted? And frankly, it's an unanswered question. And what you'll end up hearing amongst academics and also people in the business is, it's almost like the development industry isn't getting the message, right? So we've got this great technology and nobody seems to be adopting it. My research looked at a theory that oligopoly may help to explain it. Oligopoly is sort of like monopoly, but rather than a single seller in a market, you have a very few, like say the airline industry, where there are few enough that one player can actually impact the market by changing price and quantity. My research looks at that, but there's a larger context, that I think that we have to look at as an industry that has to do mostly with the way that we communicate with the industry that is our primary client, and that's real estate developers, and by extension, the financiers that finance real estate development.
Right. So, all right. So we have the developers, we have the real estate folks, we have the other builders in the country and throughout the world, frankly, that are now playing in our market, right? One of the things that we were touching on is with the developers that are out there, the big developers, right? What is stopping them? So is it they can't make money doing this? Is that what's stopping them? Is it a profitability thing? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a perception? Or is it just a return on their investment? Or all the above?
Yeah, I think honestly, the communication issue is paramount, because the early research, the first channel of, is it viable, looked at, is it profitable? Is it green? Is it fast? Is it more precise? And the answer was sort of resoundingly yes on those issues. Mm-hmm. So the question is, well, if it's superior, how come it's not being adopted, right? So I believe, based on not the actual research question itself, but sort of the auxiliary learning that came from the research, it seems pretty clear that there's a communication problem there somehow. That it's two-way communication. So the modular industry isn't doing a very great job of expressing to the real estate development finance industries how good we really are and how we solve their problems. And by extension also, the finance industry and the development industry isn't doing a very good job of communicating to the modular industry, right, what their issues are that they would like us to solve. And to their defense, we're so small. By comparison, if you think about the modular industry altogether, offsite construction represents what is it, 3% or something like that of new construction, and most of that is modular,
depending on what article or research paper you look at.
And most of that is under the HUD code. So my business is in multifamily, offsite for multifamily. So if you take most of it being manufactured homes, and so a very small percentage, and I don't know exactly what that number is, are actual modular under the local code, and then a great number of those are single family homes. And so by the time you get to multifamily, which is where most of that investment dollar goes to in onsite, we represent such a small piece that it's difficult to expect them to come find us and say, maybe you guys are the solution to our problem. It's sort of incumbent upon us to initiate that communication and learn how to speak their language, learn how to speak the language of finance and development, so that we can sell our wares to them.
Yeah,
or to us, I guess, like on both sides of that.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, we are a small industry, but even as a small industry, we don't even communicate well to ourselves.
That's right.
Who we are and what we do. So to expect that we're going to go out to the masses, we'll ask this question at the end as well. Is like, we don't even know what to call ourselves anymore. It seems like
that's such a fun question. It's such a fun question because it's everywhere. We're all over the place. But I think it is really important for us to think about our position in the market from the perspective of what it is that we're actually trying to do. So unless we're independently funded or financed or internally, we have to understand that a big part of what it is that we do in any industry is you have to understand the voice of the customer, the VOC, right? So you have to know who it is that your customers are and what it is that they're asking for. Any business 101 only exists to solve someone's problem. So you figure out what their problem is, and then you identify the features of your offering that address those problems, but you have to then communicate it to them in ways that they understand. Mm-hmm. So in our industry, what that really means is understanding how real estate developers make decisions. How is it that a real estate developer decides to either green light a project or not? What is it that they use? So they use something called a pro forma, usually a 10-year pro forma. It outlines cash flows that come in and cash flows that go out over the 10-year lifespan of a building. And that 10 years starts from the moment they pull the trigger on the construction loan, right? So they have, in my world, in multifamily, you have the rents that come in, you have whatever expenses go out to manage. So your on-site management, perhaps you're covering utilities, et cetera. And then at the bottom of that, each year's line, you have either your income for profitable years or your losses for the first couple of years when you're doing nothing but construction, and then discount all those back to year zero to figure out what that project is actually worth in terms of net present value and internal rate of return. Those are the primary ratios. And so if we don't understand how developers decide to either greenlight a job or not, then we can't communicate to them how we impact those decisions. Most proposals for projects are rejected. I mean, 19 out of 20 are rejected. A very few are actually profitable. But if they were to build modular, far more of those would be greenlighted because that 10-year pro forma would change from 3 years of loss and 7 years of profit to possibly 1 year of loss and 9 years of profit, and early profit, which is important. We talked a little bit before we came on air about, if I gave you $100 today versus $100 10 years from now, the $100 today is worth a lot more. So those early years are very important, and we're the ones who can give them back year 2 and year 3 as incoming, profit, and that has a huge impact on the value of the development.
So profitability for developers in speaking in their language in a marketing term as well as a financial term, and reaching into their wallet and saying, this is why offsite is better, modular, panelized, whatever it is. And here is the mathematics that's get you from point A to point B to make this decision. Who's going to be best suited to solve that problem for them? Who's going to be the one that points that, or draws that big picture? So when they look at this, they're not looking through their kind of funneled vision of how they used to do things. They have to look at it a little bit differently. How do we do that? How do we speak their language? And who's going to do it?
I think that's an excellent point. I think that it's more about not just about the who's going to actually communicate it, but who's going to actually execute it. So we're uniquely positioned to execute that, right? So if time is money, literally in this case, then we as the offsite industry are able to compress that production schedule in a way that an on-site builder simply can't, especially now in the age of COVID, when no one can hand you a board that's shorter than 6 feet. You know what I mean? I mean, how do you do construction now? So in a factory environment, we have the capacity to compress that, and then we have also the capacity to speak that language. Now, granted, on-site developers and off-site developers are rather producers, I should say. So contractors and factories, we all face the same problems, right? Of communicating how we fit into the developers and the financiers model. But it's not a long road for factories to figure out how to speak that language. The sophistication of what it is that we do in the factory is actually greater than the sophistication of what the financiers do. So if we can speak the language of manufacturing, then we can very quickly learn to speak the language of finance. It's really mostly about us figuring out what that language is, and then using that as an extension of our marketing and our explanation. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. So if you are in a factory, and your part of your process, of course, is going to be some type of continuous improvement strategy, then you're measuring what it is that you're doing. And then if you're using a Six Sigma cycle, for instance, the DMAIC cycle, you're defining, measuring, analyzing, improving, controlling, going back to define, measure, analyze, improve, control. That's all managed through digital tools, perhaps Excel or some other digital tool like R or something like that, where you're looking at the data and you're analyzing it. Well, that's exactly what's happening for a developer or a financier that's using a pro forma. It's just a tool. It's just a model in Excel. And that, rather than showing the manufacturing process, is showing the use of the building as an asset over time, how it generates cash flows. So if we can understand what it is that we do using Excel in a factory, then we can understand how to express that to a financier. And I mean, it's really a week of watching videos on Udemy or lynda.com, through LinkedIn, will teach you that, how to build a pro forma and how to interpret it. And that would be a week well served for our industry to learn what language we can speak to our customers with, because those are our customers and they speak a different language.
So, I mean, speaking of developers, I mean, wouldn't part of this conversation be shorter build cycles, controlled costs, quicker, faster equity in their projects because they're moving them heads on beds faster, so to speak, whether it's, rental units or even if it's subdivisions or what have you? Would that not be part of this whole cyclical process for them? Or can we still not, from a manufacturing standpoint, build as quickly as they can build their subdivisions and these units on site?
No, we certainly can. Absolutely. And I think that that certainly that is a huge part of the way that we sell. But from a salesperson standpoint, if you just think of it if you're just doing sales training, one of the things that you would train a salesperson to do is talk about the feature of a product, the advantage of the product, and then the benefit from that advantage. And for our problem in our industry, and this is it's not just us, it's many industries suffer from the same thing, is we talk about the feature and we assume that the customer then gets what the benefit is, and we leave out the advantage in between. So I'll give you an example of that for a car, for instance, for a used car salesman. You would say, A feature of the car is that it's small with a small little engine. That's the feature. The advantage is that small little cars with small little engines use very little gas. The benefit is that you save money driving a car like this, right? So, but if you start off and just say, this is a small little car with a small little engine, and assume that the customer is going to get from that, okay, I'm going to save money because of that, then you may be going a stretch too far in assuming that they understand that. And for us, we have talked about speed and quality and precision, right? And so what is that? So precision is a feature. So if you have a very precise building, then that's a feature. What's the advantage of that? Well, precise buildings don't leak as much. What's the benefit from that? Well, much less leaking means less problems with water intrusion. It means lower cost of climate control through your mechanical. There are lots of different benefits, but we just give them the feature and assume that they're going to make that leap to the benefit to them, and that's not usually the case.
Yeah,
in any industry.
Well, no, I can understand that, but it's kind of funny. Maybe they should reach out to the small modular builders all around the country, because all day long they're selling against stick builders. So maybe there's some solutions on what they're selling the consumer, right? And talking about the features and benefits, but basically it's a comparison. You're saying the same thing. We have to sell ourselves to the developers and to the multifamily and the hospitality, which has kind of embraced this already, as to why the features and the benefits to you, Mr. Consumer, is better for you to go this route. I get that.
But understanding, I think the thing that we miss is, if you go back a step for the used car salesman who's on the lot, the used car salesman doesn't start off with features, advantages, and benefits. The used car salesman starts off by saying, oh, are you married? Oh, how old are your kids? What part of town do you live in? What do you do for a living, right? And what they're trying to understand is, what is the use for this car? What are the benefits that you're really looking for?
Right.
If you already own an Escalade and they start trying to sell you, a Suburban, they're probably screwing up. Maybe you came in there for the economical car. Maybe your daughter's going off to college. Maybe you have a long commute. Maybe whatever. And so what they want to find out is, what is it that this person is looking for? Tell me how to sell you. And that's the part that we haven't really done effectively, is said to that industry, even as individuals or just as an industry and as a whole, tell us how to sell you. What are you interested in? Are you interested in quality? Are you interested in precision? Are you interested in speed? What do you want?
Sure. Well, I mean, again, the developers are interested in the return on investment.
Right.
That's what it comes down to for them. It's not a personal thing. It's a business decision.
That's right. And so how do they interpret? That's the benefit they want, right? And so how do we then say, now we have these specific ways to address those pieces? For us, time is absolutely one of our best tools, because we're able to finish that deal so quickly and get the project finished. It becomes an asset as opposed to being a liability much faster. So just in very simple terms, understanding that, for instance, a construction loan is much higher interest than standard loan, mortgage if it's a house, or conventional, just a loan on an asset, real estate asset. Making that conversion as soon as possible is important. Not as much now because interest rates are just astronomically low. But typically, you can save, quite a bit of money just by making that switch. So us being able to speak that language of conversion time, right, is an important piece. But we have to have those conversations, because each developer and each private equity investor has a different level of sensitivity to each, of these different components.
Right.
If someone wants to buy and hold, then the precision of construction that makes it much less expensive to maintain and operate that asset over time, that developer is going to be very sensitive. But someone who's building and selling, just waiting the year to get out of the tax burden and then selling the asset, that developer isn't sensitive to those types of issues. They're sensitive to initial cost. They're sensitive to being able to lease it up quickly, and get full income, and then be able to establish that income to to calculate their value. NOI over cap rate equals value. So it's understanding how they evaluate assets and how we can speak to those are critical to us being able to penetrate.
Yeah, for sure. All right, everybody, listen, if you are just joining us, we have the one, the only Dr. Brent Musson on with us today. And we haven't even touched the surface yet, because Dr. Brent Musson also has a manufacturing facility in Los Angeles, and it has a social aspect to it. And Doctor, you're taking a completely different approach, and we're going to jump into that here in a few moments. So, but if you are joining us, we are live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Please hit that like and share button. Let us know where you're from. And why don't we go in and look at a few comments real quick to engage some of the audience. I'm curious as to what might be happening behind the scenes here, because I see the red dot blowing up. All right. Good morning, George Ryman. Always a pleasure seeing you in the morning, George. From hot Phoenix, Arizona, we have good old Rick Hawkins joining us from hot Atlanta. Everywhere's hot right now, it seems like. We got Mitch. Good morning, Mitch Lunn. Dave and all, happy Monday to you as well. All right, Joel Hutchins. Good afternoon from somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. Man, he must have paid for that internet service on his flight. Everybody, just so you know, this guy right here, Joel Hutchins, is going to be on the show, Splash Modular, this Wednesday. Brent, you want to tune into this, because he is doing some things that's going to change the face of this industry. I do believe that with their software. So don't want to miss that. All right. Jennifer says good morning to our West Coast viewers.
Hey.
That would include you, Doctor.
Yeah. Hi, Jennifer.
All right, let's run through. George Rivera said quite a bit of stuff on YouTube. Typically, GCs don't know how to price the work. Banks have trouble financing. Brent Musson approach is going to make a big dent in major U.S. metropolitan housing shortage. I agree. Alvin Shea, you know Alvin?
I do. Good friend of mine.
Good. I agree with Alvin. Once we get into this factory that you have, it's going to be interesting. Getting everyone up to speed with modular is the key to future construction. George Rivera, and thank you for joining us this morning, by the way, George and Alvin. We also have Damian Pipkins. Hey, Brent, man, you're a popular guy on YouTube. Love it. Our good friend Mark Willie. Hey, guys, are you ready for some building science this Friday? Always plugging our show Friday. Gotta love Mark. Hey, Mark, hope you are well. Andrew Seeley, good day, all. Another great show with a top-level expert guest. Absolutely. All right, Joel Hutchins. Would you relate our adoption issues to the process of pre-construction? I agree completely that we have a communication issue, which is highlighted with the device between IC and designers. Oh, is it divide? Divide between IC and designers. What's your thoughts there, Doctor?
So I think the pre-construction process is it's the dependencies that make the difference. So if you have a pre-construction process and you're on site, then your pre-construction process is there's a dependency to the rest of your construction process to the pre-construction. So you have to wait until pre-construction is complete, and then you begin your construction process. Our advantage clearly is that you can begin the construction of modules in a factory while pre-construction is taking place. The difficulty for us is in figuring out how to fully exploit the removal of that dependency, right? So there are some pieces. Let's say, for instance, you're doing low-income housing. The low-income housing certification is slower than the entire process of your pre-construction as well as your construction in the factory or building in the factory. So you could conceivably grade, trench, pour, and then stack your modules, make all your connections, finish the exteriors, and not get your final occupancy because you're still waiting on certification for low-income housing, so that you can get your final permit signed off. And so for us, it's really important to understand that the process itself, the entire process is comprehensive. And so it's incumbent upon us to understand that end to end so that if we have a bottleneck like that, we're attacking that bottleneck early. You may end up actually having to initiate, which is unusual for on-site, but not necessarily for off-site, initiate the low-income housing component before you've even trenched. You may even initiate it during escrow. So there are things that we have to understand about that process where the dependencies themselves, our ability to eliminate the dependencies is one of our greatest assets, but we haven't figured out how to fully exploit those.
Great answer. All right, perfect. Joel, if you have any follow-ups on that, let us know. Anthony Goudet joining us. Great point with positioning in the market. I think Anthony put another comment further down, so we will get to that. George Rivera, Brent is 100% correct. Communication is key with all development vendors. Most developers don't invest in R&D. We want dependable variables in the spreadsheets. R&D isn't budgeted. Very true. And if you're joining us, everyone, I read these out loud because I don't believe the comments go to all three platforms. That way, we need some technology in that. Maybe Joel Hutchins, you can develop some technology to help me with that one. But that's why we read them out loud. And plus, it's good to document. All right. And I have to work on my reading skills. As Doctor knows, that's why I do video. I'm not much on reading. So this is my reading skills, my brain work for the day. All right, Ian Pope, afternoon or evening from the UK. Hey, Ian, it is good to hear from you. Thank you for joining us today. All right, Todd Burether. As a design manufacturers, we understand the difference in value proposition between product development and project development. In your research, is this a communication area to improve with finance real estate developers?
So yeah, Todd, the strategy that Todd's referring to is the idea of creating sub-assemblies and how turning parts of real estate development into products, how that relates to the pro forma that we discussed, right? So if you are a real estate developer and you're looking at your overall project with a particular value, how does the individual value of sub-assemblies impact the overall value of the project? And yes, I do believe that is one of our greatest assets as an industry, is the ability to standardize and productize components. So I'll give you an example of something that relates directly to Todd. So if Todd is able to create a wall from cross-laminated timber, and that wall then becomes a product, then a developer is able to say, okay, well, the combination of these products then makes a house. So now that developer, or I should say the assembly plant, the manufacturer of the offsite built house, then is able to take these products together and create something that is an assembly. So taking sub-assemblies and making assemblies out of them. The more efficient Todd's process is in making those products, the more efficient the factory is in making the house. And so, or in my case, the apartment building. So what Todd's suggesting is that as we have separation of our process into specialties, one that specializes in the subassembly of a wall, another that specializes in the subassembly of the kitchen, another that makes floor cassettes, ceiling cassettes, etc., then the overall industry becomes more efficient and each of us becomes better at our jobs.
Perfect. Good. So Todd, if you have a follow-up on that, please let us know. We're going to do a couple more and then we'll jump back into our conversation here, Doctor. Or I'll call you Brent. However you like it. So, all right, Brent. Listen, we have Lucy Mata from Facebook joining us, says never assume. That is absolutely right. And we have D. Lynn, Dr. Musson. Do you know D?
That's Dr. D. Lynn.
All these doctors, man. I'm so privileged to be able to hang out with all these doctors, right? I love it. Outstanding. I mean, the amount of work you guys put into learning what you learn is absolutely amazing to me. And I'm glad you're here to share it with us. All right. Jennifer, who is sitting behind the screen here, said maybe the new slogan should be precision equals performance equals pro forma, ?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that whatever it is that we're dealing with, precision in this case, for instance, if we are going to brag on precision, we do have to figure out how that relates to the pro forma. Everything that we brag about has to relate to the pro forma because that is that is, I won't say the singular tool, but it's the primary tool by which decisions, go, no-go decisions are made. So Jennifer's absolutely right. Everything has to end up equaling pro forma in the end.
Yep. Perfect. Great. Jennifer, you have a follow-up? Please let us know. All right, moving along. We'll do two more and then we're going to hop in. Anthony Goodday, in my experience, different developers have different needs depending on strategy, AKA different features, advantages, and benefits apply. That's very true.
Yes. And that's why it's important to ask that question. It's important to be like that car salesperson that asks, what do you do for a living? How many people are in your family? Why do you want to buy this car? Tell me how to sell you. And that's exactly what he's saying. Absolutely.
Absolutely. We'll say a quick hello real quick to Joe Jaworski. Hey, what's happening? I said Joe. John, what's happening, John? Glad you could join us today. Look forward to catching up here shortly. So, all right, Brent, let's get back into this a little bit, right? We got a lot more feeds coming in. So, Anthony, Rick, and Henry, everybody, I'll get to your questions and we'll get some comments out to you. But we got to keep the show rolling on this side. So, we kind of covered everything, kind of in an umbrella approach in regards to your research paper. Why don't we just say, if you could sum up what was the conclusion of your research paper, and then I want to jump into Musson factories.
Sure. So I'll give you two conclusions. First, we have the actual research question itself, which was really testing research that was done out of Johns Hopkins that found quantitatively that oligopoly theory could help to explain the shortage of housing overall. So really what they're talking about were single-family home builders, the large builders. There are so few of them that they are able to control supply by reducing their own supply. Each individual supplier reduces supply, which increases demand and allows them to earn supernormal profits on housing. So I was testing that application, not for single family homes, but for multifamily homes in LA. So is oligopoly responsible for the lack of adoption of this superior method of housing development, modular construction? No, it's not. So that's answer number one. But contextually, to ask that question, we had to look at the market from a regulatory standpoint, from a finance standpoint, from a social standpoint, and all of these other three-dimensional view all around the question before asking the question. And so what we came with, the learning that came with that was not just about why there's a shortage and what those obstacles may be, but also what other reasons may there be for a low adoption. And one thing that we really found is that there's a lack of good perception. So we talked to the biggest multifamily incumbent landlords in Los Angeles who are also developers, and we talked to them about a number of issues about their perceptions around the issue of adoption and around the technologies associated with offsite construction. We found that they just didn't know what it was that we did that was going to work for them. They didn't have a real good understanding of how our industry answers their problems. And they didn't really have a good understanding actually of even the process enough to know about the risk factors and other things that they look at that help them to make their decisions. And so really in the end of my study, like most academic studies, there's an area where you sort of say, look, based on everything that we learned so far, this is what I recommend as the next stage of research in this area. I recommend in the conclusion that we look at Shannon and Weaver's communication theory. So Shannon and Weaver did a paper out of the 1950s, I think it was, out of Bell Labs, and they identified the communication model. And so I suggest that we look at the communication model to determine how and why we are breaking down our communication between these two industries, why development, finance, group them together, and the offsite modular construction industry aren't able to communicate. And so that's our learning is that it's probably a communication model.
Yeah, you know what, and we'll put some of those links, when we're done, Brent, if we can add some of those links to some of these theories and even put a link to your research paper in this news feed, because I have a feeling it's going to get shared quite a bit. All right.
Absolutely.
I almost need Mark Willie's drum roll right now, because let's jump in to Dr. Musson. I love it. I love it. Musson Factories. Let's talk about this, because what you're doing is so different than what a lot of other manufacturers are doing. And you're not really a manufacturer in that sense. It's you explain it. I love this.
Sure. So manufacturing happens in a number of different ways. And the way that we do it in our industry is primarily fabrication. But fabrication is dependent upon journeyman, skilled tradespeople. And what we're looking for is a way to move the skill of the tradesperson from the individual, being vested in the individual, and vest it into the process itself. The best manufacturing strategy to do that is MTA, manufacture to assemble. And so the way that works is there's the fabrication is done by individual contributors that make sub-assemblies. And then the final player is something called a product integrator that takes those sub-assemblies and combines them together to make a single unified product. So I'll give you an example. For instance, if you are an airplane manufacturer like Airbus doesn't actually fabricate its seats or its lids for the overheads or the exit door, and absolutely anything. What they do is they design and specify, they test, they fabricate the components as prototypes until they're satisfied with that component, and then they RFQ out, request for qualifications, to a list of vendors. Based on the qualified responses, they send out an RFP for a request for proposal. Based on the proposals that come back, they choose the vendors that they want to do the fabrications for them, and then they send out those contracts. Those vendors produce, fabricate those components, and they make them back to Airbus. Airbus then assembles those pieces into their unified product, which in their case is an airplane, and out the door it goes. And so Musson Factory is modeled that way, so that our primary function is as a product integrator, assembling those pieces in the end into a unified product, which in our case is the module.
So, I mean, this isn't a new concept, right? I mean, this, like you said, I mean, Boeing's do it, the car manufacturers do it, Apple Computer does it, Dell, they all do this. You just saying why
everybody.
Right. You know, but hey, listen, you know, I don't want to brag, but we're only 150 years behind the times in our industry. So, let's not get too ahead of ourselves here to even do something similar to technology innovation and moving things forward. So let's talk about the factory and, your solution to some of the, people that need jobs where you're doing these factories. Let's talk about the social aspect, right? Because outsourcing and using your manufacturing as an assembly line, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
You're doing things in a way to where you can really take people that don't really necessarily have a skilled trade and put them in an environment of assembly that not only helps you build your product at affordable price point, but it also allows you to put people to work, which I think is amazing.
Sure. Absolutely. I think that that's certainly the factory environment is the hurdle is much lower than going into a trade. So if you want to become a journeyman carpenter, for instance, the apprenticeship program is about a 4-year process to end up becoming a journeyman carpenter. Onboarding in a factory is much a shorter process, maybe a matter of just a few weeks. And so working in Musson Factory can certainly provide employment at a much faster rate. But our greatest advantage isn't really, and our greatest benefit to the community isn't really about us hiring folks within Musson Factory. It's really about the process itself. So let's think about, for instance, Ford's plant at Rogue River plant in Michigan. So the plant started off doing everything under the same roof. Everything was made there, to make the Model T, et cetera. So generations later, they ended up becoming a product integrator with exterior vendors, outside vendors, making the engine block, making the glass, doing the seats, etc. And Ford became an assembly plant. Now, what that did for Detroit, though, was it created an ecosystem around auto manufacturing. In other words, if you're GM and you wanted to become an auto manufacturer, the only place to be is in Detroit because you have access to foundries and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone you needed, chrome plating plants, et cetera. But what I think would amaze most Americans is when they sit in their Ford or their GM vehicle, they would be amazed at the size of the shop that makes the engine block. It's not a huge, in most cases, not a huge plant that's making a lot of these parts. A lot of these are sort of mom and pop businesses that may have grown to be larger than they were, but they started off small and they're locally owned and so forth. So the social impact of Musson Factory is not about who we can hire at the actual assembly plant as much as it is about the businesses that it spurs. Right. So if we are only assembling and we have someone that's making wiring looms for us and someone that's making plumbing manifolds for us and someone who's et cetera, and whatever other sub-assemblies we're using to create our modules, if we have mom and pops that are set up by us where we have our own controls on quality, we have our own methodology for the fabrication and our own testing protocols, then we can set someone else up on the outside to be a wholly owned business that's not us. And we're hoping, there's certainly no way that we can absorb all of the housing demand as Musson Factory. So we're hoping for other assembly plants to come in. We're hoping that the GM plant shows up in Detroit. You know what I mean? We're hoping that we can do that, not only in Los Angeles, but in Baltimore and in St. Louis. And, there's frankly, in every city in Los Angeles, there are disenfranchised, underemployed communities. And they're always around the things that no one wants to live around, like big warehouses, lots of power infrastructure, railroads, and all of the other things that we need, the infrastructure that we need to actually produce the type of housing that we're talking about. Now, let me just say this. What we're dealing with in Southern California is not unlike what's being dealt with in other parts of the country. We have a deep housing shortage, and the cost of housing is out of reach for most of the people who live here. So we have people who are paying 70%, 1/3 of our population pays 70% of their household income for housing. It's absolutely insane, the cost of housing and the shortage. And I wish I could find this citation because I don't like to make claims that I can't cite, but I do remember reading somewhere that we would have to double our housing production just to keep up with the shortage that we already have. Right. So it's like the ocean. There's plenty of business out there to be had. So we're not afraid of other players coming into the market and selling. We're not afraid of other players coming in and doing our business model. Matter of fact, the reason I'm here sharing this business model is because I'm hoping that this becomes infectious and that our industry can be better at what we do, but we can do it in a socially conscious way that creates not only employment benefit, but also business ownership in areas that right now are desperately in need of it.
You know what? You hit the nail on the head, no pun intended. Socially conscious way. Listen, I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing. You're not only looking to help be a solution to the affordable housing crisis, so that's one of them, but you're actually looking to build the businesses around you that would support your business. So you're building not only the community, but you're actually creating jobs outside of the jobs you've already created within your own business versus just going to, a big supplier and ordering everything through a big supply warehouse. Yeah. So I think that's commendable. And I think it's going to be, brilliant for you. I couldn't imagine why people wouldn't want to do this. Look at our environment today, right? People want to work. We need to do something that can help provide housing and take these, areas, like you said, that aren't really desirable for people that want to live and bring them back so the community has something, because they're still in somebody's community and they still need something to be done with it. And you're saying, well, let's create jobs in this community. We'll build houses by putting everything together in my manufacturing plant. But I'm going to help you, Mr. Plumber, and you, Mr. Electrician, and you, Mrs. Sheetrocker. You're going to do all this in your plant, and we're going to help you get that up and running too. And we're going to build our own small ecosystem. I love that.
Absolutely, and I think it's really critical to sort of understand the larger dynamics from a macroeconomic standpoint. So what we're talking about in South Los Angeles, I live here, so I know this particular problem. So South Los Angeles and East Los Angeles, the economic problem that we have there is a lack of primary income. So if you compare primary income and secondary income is the money that circulates within a local economy.
Right.
Primary revenue is what comes from outside, from another economy. It's sort of like the local GDP, right? So disenfranchised communities, their big problem is they don't create anything that they sell to other communities to bring money in. So the only money that comes in is people who work, bring their paychecks in, and people who are on government assistance bring their assistance checks in. And then immediately that money is spent on things that are produced someplace else. So all the money leaves immediately to that community. And so what we're talking about here with our strategy is that there's a housing crisis. We can't keep up with production. So it's one of the biggest expenses that anyone would spend their money on is housing. It's one of the biggest investments that investors invest in is building housing developments. So what if we're able to make those things in these disenfranchised communities and sell them to other communities where development is happening, market rate development and luxury development, and that's happening, in other local more affluent communities. Well, their housing crisis is being addressed while the underemployment and economic development issues are also being addressed in less affluent areas. And it helps both, not only because it's addressing the housing crisis and creating income there, but it's creating economic opportunity without having to tax the affluent communities. It's not the low-income housing tax credit even, where it creates tax breaks for wealthy investors to invest in low-income areas. It's not even that. It's just a market-driven thing. It's about as conservative a method of addressing a social ill as you can possibly imagine. It's a fully market-driven solution to that problem, which also addresses the housing crisis, which hits everybody. So in that way, it's designed to sort of balance the two. It's apolitical, and it's direct market solution to a social problem.
Absolutely, love it. I love it. I think. Listen, when we go on our tour, which we're putting together right now, I hope that Musson Factory allows us to come in and showcase what you're doing, not only with this, but with the businesses around you. I think the story needs to be told. It's an incredible story, and it'll be fun to watch you and hopefully even participate in getting the word out. So
absolutely.
Let's hop in here to some comments. We are at about 56 minutes already. Can you believe it? Let's go.
Wow, that went fast.
Yeah. So let's get into this and let's see who we have here. Sorry, I got to scroll up and take a look. All right, Joel, we already did. Joel, we did these. We got Anthony message. Did we do this one? Brent Musson surely has the right idea. In markets overseas, my understanding is that manufacturing processes are completely driven by design and manufacturing technologies, and the tech companies have evolved past vertically integrated facilities. I hope Joel Hutchins touches on this Wednesday.
Well, specifically the idea of vertical integration, I think, is one of our biggest stumbling blocks in this industry. So the example I gave of building airplanes is the exact opposite of vertical integration. They don't fabricate anything; they just assemble. And separating out these functions into companies that can focus on doing one thing very, very well is the opposite of vertical integration. I think that we've done this terrible thing of thinking that our solution is bringing plumbers in-house and bringing plasterers in-house and bringing electricians in-house. And now we're basically all the trades plus the general all in one package. And that's sort of the reverse of what manufacturing is about.
Love it. All right, we got a long one. You ready? Henry Mickelberg, it's encouraging to hear from an academic who understands the real life challenges of the industry. A recent, I guess it's CIRA, I can't even say it. A recent CIRIA MMC research project by the University of Cambridge had perfect research methodology, as one might expect. However, their findings were almost unusable due to their ability to manage the market research. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, so there are very few bridges between academia and actual practice. So the idea here of my research was designed specifically to try to capitalize or exploit my experience as a general contractor to give me context. Now, as an academic, you don't want to enter into your research and become part of the story, as reporters would say. But having that real world experience does give you a little bit of insight of where to look. And so it shows up in the paper in that way, not voicing my own opinion, but I did know where to look because I had that experience out there. And I think that's probably what you'll see when you read the paper. Perfect.
And remember, everybody, we're going to have links to these things. Dr. Musson's going to add some of these links so you guys can all watch it if you're not familiar with it. Anthony, good day. Thank you, Anthony. Henry Mickelberg, such a winning combination on the Dave Cooper show today. I love it. Anthony and Henry, they always bring a world of conversation and knowledge, so it's always fun. All right. Hello, Jude. Good to see you. I hope all is well. Joe Butler, Anthony Good, lead AP. Instead of prolonged approval processes negatively impact time to market, you can refocus funding, thus connecting strategy to product development. Perfect. And then we got a couple comments from Damian Pipkins. The Rust Belt would be great at this. Also,
let me just tell you, Damian works in government, in city government, right?
Okay.
And so he has the opposite side of the perspective, looking at this from the perspective of the municipality. And it's important to understand that the municipality and developers have such different perspectives. So when you get endorsement from someone from the city, then you're on the right track.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, especially when it's about budgets and trying to do things in an affordable way and help people. Hopefully that's all of their goals. So I love it. Well, Damian, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate having you on the show. Amina Ahad, I think is how we say it. How can this assembly process be adapted overseas construction?
So overseas is always a challenge because the materials are different. Most of the world builds with concrete block, and concrete block and offsite construction are difficult to integrate. But there are things, structural panels that can be used for that purpose. And one thing that I realized as well is that the higher you go, the more acceptance there is for different materials, used in construction. So if you're building a high-rise or mid-rise apartment complex, then that type of offsite construction can work. And it's particularly the idea of using an MTA method with a product integrator is particularly suited for those types of overseas markets if you're going to set up the whole infrastructure there, because they only, each fabrication node only has to learn how to do one thing rather than trying to learn an entirely foreign and novel process of construction.
Right, for sure. Great answer. I'm not sure who this is. There's no picture up there. Wow, maybe that's Jude. She doesn't always show up with her pictures. Not sure why. All right, Damian Pipkins. Also, the Port of LA is open for the movement of modular units. You're becoming one of my favorite officials. I am telling you right now, Damian. We need to have you on the show and talk further because you don't hear that very often. So love it. Thank you. All right, moving on along here. Anthony, good day. Brent Musson surely has the right idea and market overseas. My understanding is that the manufacturing processes are complete. Oh, I did this one already. I'm ahead of myself. We're bouncing around. All right, moving on. Joe Butler. Anthony Goudet, lead AP's approach also allows for scalability in nimble manufacturing environments. Yep, love it. We got a couple more, and then we're going to wrap it up here, everybody. If you got...
Hey, Rick.
Yep, got it up here. Rick, bath pods, flat pack kitchens, and wet shell assembly coupled with hybrid on-site coordination may speed the process. What's your thoughts for Rick on that one?
What he's talking about really is the idea of sub-assemblies. So if your kitchen is a sub-assembly, if your walls are sub-assemblies, anything that you can actually make a sub-assembly that you can assemble as a piece rather than components that go into a fabrication process is an advantage. And so the idea of bathroom pods has been around forever. The whole unit goes in as one piece. If you're doing a house, what if you